My name is Amanda Wilson, and at 26 years old, I found myself standing in the pouring rain outside my childhood home, with nothing but my laptop bag and car keys. Just hours earlier, my father had screamed in my face to get out and never come back, all because I decided law school wasn't for me. What they didn't know when they slammed that door was that the daughter they were disowning was worth $15 million. Little did they realize that the next time they saw me, I would be watching the sunset from my Malibu mansion. Before I tell you how I went from sleeping in my car to waking up in an oceanfront dream home, drop a comment, letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your own path when the world tries to. Choose it for you. I grew up in a family where your worth was measured by the letters after your name. The Wilson family legacy was built on legal pads and courtroom victories. My father, Patrick Wilson, was a third-generation attorney who had built his reputation from scratch after my grandfather retired. My older brother, Thomas, followed the golden path straight into Harvard Law without a second thought. And me, I was expected to be next. Our home in the suburbs of Boston was comfortable but never ostentatious. Dad believed showing off wealth was tacky, but he made sure we had the best of everything that mattered. The best schools, the best tutors, the best connections. Our family photos on the mantle told the story that mattered to him. Thomas in his graduation robes, Dad receiving awards, grandfather with his first big case win, framed in newspaper clippings. There were few photos of me, and those that existed showed me at debate competitions or honor society inductions. The activities that would look good on a law school application. Dinner is at 6 sharp, my mother would announce every evening, setting the table with precision. Our family dinners were more like informal depositions. Dad would interrogate us about our days, looking for evidence of achievement or areas of improvement. Thomas argued his mock trial case today, my mother would beam. His professor said he had the best opening statement in the class. My brother would pretend to be humble, but I could see the smirk hiding behind his practiced modesty. It was nothing really. Just applied what Dad taught me about jury psychology. Then attention would shift to me. Amanda, how was your constitutional law study group, Dad? Would ask, already assuming I was following the prescribed path. Those dinners were where I first learned to lie convincingly. Great, we covered the Fourth Amendment today. I would share just enough detail to satisfy him while hiding my growing disinterest in legal studies. What my family never understood was that I had different wiring. While they saw the world in terms of precedents and statutes, I saw systems and code. My first computer was a gift from my uncle when I was 12, and I taught myself to program within months. By high school, I was building simple apps and winning science fairs with technology projects that my parents saw as cute hobbies that would look good on college applications. It's fine to enjoy computers, Amanda, my mother would say with that concerned smile, but that's not a career for someone with your potential. That's something for people who couldn't get into law school. My father was less subtle. Technology is a tool, not a profession. He'd declare whenever I tried to share my latest project. Lawyers use technology. They don't waste their talents building it. Perhaps the most revealing moment came during my junior year of high school. I had stayed up for 3 nights straight to finish a program that helped small businesses automate their tax filings. My computer science teacher was so impressed, she entered it in a statewide competition where it won first place. When I brought home the trophy, my father glanced at it and said, "That's nice, honey. But did you finish your personal statement for the pre-law summer program?" The trophy went into a box in my closet. The personal statement was completed that night. My father had his own difficult story that he used to justify his rigidity. He would tell us how his father, my grandfather, had built their law firm from nothing. Your grandfather came from nothing, worked through school as a janitor, studied by candlelight, he would remind us at least once a month. He gave me opportunities he never had, and I worked my ass off to deserve them. Now I'm giving you even more, and I expect you to honor that sacrifice. It was emotional blackmail wrapped in a bootstrap narrative, and it worked for years. The weight of 3 generations of expectations was crushing, but refusing it felt like betrayal. My mother was more complicated. She would sometimes find me coding late at night and bring me tea, watching, with curious eyes as my fingers flew across the keyboard. "You really love this, don't you?" she once asked. "More than anything," I admitted. She squeezed my shoulder. "Just don't tell your father I said this, but sometimes I think you should follow your heart." Then she would immediately undermine her own advice. "But law school is a sure thing, sweetheart. Technology companies come and go." Her support was as conditional as my father's, just delivered more gently. By the time I finished high school, I had built a perfect facade. Valedictorian debate team captain, Model UN, all the right extracurriculars. I was accepted to my father's alma mater with a partial scholarship, and he bragged about it to everyone at his firm. What he didn't know was that I had also applied to computer science programs at 3 other schools and been accepted to all of them. In the end, I chose the path of least resistance. I majored in political science, took the recommended pre-law courses, and secretly added a computer science minor that I knew would feed my real passion. The double course load was brutal, but it kept both sides of me alive. By day, I was the perfect pre-law student. By night, I coded until my eyes burned. When it was time to apply to law schools, I did it mechanically, like completing a particularly tedious assignment. I was accepted to 3 top programs, and my father threw a party to celebrate. "You've made us proud," he said. The closest thing to affection he knew how to express. As I stood there holding my acceptance letters, watching my family celebrate my future, I had never felt more alone. I was stepping onto a path that would lead me further and further from myself. Law school was everything I expected, and nothing I wanted. The coursework itself wasn't the problem. I had always been a strong student, and the logical frameworks of law actually appealed to my systematic mind. What I couldn't stand was the culture, the competition, the knowledge that I was investing years of my life in a future that felt like someone else's dream. 3 weeks into my first semester, I signed up for an elective computer science class that fit between my law courses. It was pitched as coding for legal applications, which made it easy to justify to my father when he reviewed my course schedule during our weekly phone calls. "Smart thinking, Amanda Head," said. "Technology skills will give you an edge at the big firms." If only he knew. That class changed everything, because that's where I met Jacob Chen. He sat next to me on the first day, a lanky guy with perpetually messy hair and a quiet intensity that I immediately respected. While other students struggled with basic concepts, Jacob and I finished the in-class assignments in minutes. "You're not really a law student, are you?" he asked me after the 3rd class. I laughed. What gave me away? Nobody codes recursive functions that elegantly, unless they've been doing it for years, he said. "So what's your story?" Over coffee that turned into dinner, I told him everything. About my family legacy, the expectations, the double life. He listened without judgment, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he pulled out his laptop. "I want to show you something," he said, turning the screen toward me. It was a prototype for an app, sleek and minimalist. "I've been working on this privacy platform for months, but I need a partner who understands both the legal implications and the technical side. Someone exactly like you." The app was brilliant in its simplicity. It created encrypted communication channels for sensitive information exchanges originally designed for journalists and sources, but with potential applications for legal, medical, and financial communications. In a world of increasing data breaches, it solved a genuine problem. "I can't," I said automatically, thinking of my course, load my family the path I was supposed to be on. "Just think about it," Jacob said, closing his laptop. "We're not talking about dropping out. Just some side work, a few hours a week." I should have known a few hours was a lie. Within a month, I was spending every evening in Jacob's apartment or the 24-hour coffee shop near campus coding until sunrise. We called our project Cypher, and it quickly became more real to me than anything in my law textbooks. To maintain appearances, I developed a careful routine. I attended all my law classes and study groups during the day, making just enough insightful comments to maintain my reputation as a serious student. I did the minimum required reading on the bus between classes. I called my parents every Sunday with carefully prepared updates about cases and professors. And every night I became myself again working with Jacob on Cypher. 6 months into this double life, we had a working prototype. We tested it with a small group of student journalists and privacy advocates, refining the interface and security protocols based on their feedback. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with users praising the intuitive design and robust protection. Then came the moment that changed everything. A major social media company suffered a catastrophic data breach, exposing the private messages and information of millions of users. Privacy suddenly became the hottest topic in tech, and apps like ours were exactly what people were looking for. Jacob and I made the decision to launch Cypher, publicly expecting a modest response. What we got instead was a viral explosion. Within 24 hours, we had 50,000 downloads. By the end of the week, over 300,000. I still remember sitting in contracts law trying to focus on promissory estoppel while my phone silently vibrated with download notifications. My professor called on me and I answered on autopilot, giving a textbook response, while my mind was calculating server costs and scaling solutions. "Excellent analysis, Miss Wilson," he said. "Your father would be proud. If he only knew." A month after our launch, we received an email from Sierra Ventures, a respected angel investment firm. They wanted to meet. Jacob and I stayed up all night preparing our pitch deck, and I skipped my constitutional law class to make the meeting. The investors were impressed not just with our technology, but with our timing. "Privacy is the next frontier," the lead investor told us. "And you've built something that actually works." They offered us $500,000 for a 15% stake in the company. We accepted immediately, using the funds to hire 2 additional developers and move our operations from Jacob's apartment to a small office space. I told my family I had taken a part-time legal internship, which explained my reduced availability for family dinners and weekend visits. The stress of my double life was becoming unbearable. I was sleeping 3 hours a night, maintaining passing grades in law school while secretly running a growing tech startup. I lost weight, developed migraines, and started having anxiety attacks in bathroom stalls between classes. But Cypher kept growing. Our user base crossed the 1 million mark. Tech blogs wrote features about us. Competitors started offering similar services, but our head start and superior technology kept us in the lead. Then came the email that would force me to choose. Artemis Tech, a major security software company, wanted to discuss acquisition. They valued our technology, user base, and expertise. Their initial offer, $15 million. Jacob and I met with their executive team over a series of dinners and presentations. They were serious, and their offer was legitimate. They wanted to integrate our technology into their enterprise security suite and keep us on as lead developers with generous compensation packages. "This is it," Jacob said as we left the final meeting. "Life-changing money, and the chance to see our work reach millions more users." I knew he was right, but I also knew what accepting would mean. I couldn't run a startup division at Artemis while pretending to be a law student. The double life would have to end. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by law textbooks I hadn't opened in weeks and printouts of the acquisition offer. I called my cousin Lily, the only family member who knew about Cypher. "What should I do?" I asked her. "The fact that you're even asking means you already know," she said. "You've been living a lie for 2 years, Amanda. How much longer can you keep this up?" She was right. I had reached a breaking point. My passion, my talent, and now my financial future all pointed in one direction. I had 15 million reasons to drop out of law school, and no joy compelling me to stay. That weekend, I made my decision. On Monday morning, I emailed my professors to withdraw from my courses. Then I called my parents and asked if I could come over for dinner that evening. I had news to share. I spent the entire day rehearsing what I would say. I wrote talking points on index cards, like I was preparing for a debate competition. I practiced in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to anticipate every possible reaction and counter-argument. I even put on one of my court appearance outfits, a navy blue pencil skirt and blazer, that my mother had helped me pick out, thinking it might subconsciously signal to my father that I was still the responsible daughter he believed me to be. I arrived at exactly 6:30, the time my mother had specified when I called. The familiar drive to the suburbs felt different, knowing that everything would change after tonight. The house looked the same as always, a stately colonial, with perfect landscaping and warm lights glowing from within. For a moment I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, fighting the urge to drive away and continue my charade. "Just tell the truth," I whispered to myself. "They love you. They want you to be happy." Even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. My mother answered the door with her usual polite smile, an air kiss near my cheek. "Right on time," she said, as if my punctuality was a personal achievement for her. "Your father just opened a bottle of wine. The good one he was saving for a special occasion." "What's the occasion?" I asked, hanging my coat in the foyer closet. "You said you had news," she replied, heading back toward the kitchen. "He assumes you've made law review." My heart sank. Already I was disappointing them, and I hadn't even spoken yet. Thomas was there too, having driven in from the city where he now worked as an associate at a prestigious firm. "Little sis," he greeted me with his usual condescending nod. "Dad says you're making waves at school." Dinner was served with military precision. My mother had prepared pot roast, my father's favorite, with roasted potatoes and asparagus, arranged just so on the antique china that only came out for celebrations. My father poured the wine, a vintage Cabernet that he described in detail, though none of us really cared about the notes of blackberry and cedar he claimed to detect. We made it through the salad course with superficial conversation. Thomas dominated with stories about his latest case. My father nodded approvingly, and my mother asked polite questions at appropriate intervals. I pushed lettuce around my plate and tried to calm my racing heart. Finally, as my mother served the main course, my father turned to me. "So Amanda, your mother says, you have an announcement. Don't keep us in suspense." This was it. I set down my fork, took a sip of water, and straightened my shoulders. "I do have news," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've made a decision about my future, and it's very exciting." My father's face lit up with preemptive pride. My mother reached over to pat my hand encouragingly. Even Thomas looked mildly interested. "I've decided to leave law school." I said, the words tumbling out faster than I intended. "I've been building a technology company on the side, and we've just received an acquisition offer for $15 million. I'm going to accept it and pursue my career in tech full-time." The silence that followed was absolute. My father froze with his wine glass halfway to his lips. My mother retracted her hand from mine as if I had suddenly become contagious. Thomas snorted softly, assuming this was some kind of joke. "I'm sorry," my father finally said, setting down his glass with exaggerated care. "I must have misheard you. It sounded like you said you're dropping out." "Yes," I confirmed, reaching for confidence I didn't entirely feel. "I've withdrawn from my classes as of today. The company that's acquiring us wants me to lead their new privacy division, and it's an incredible opportunity that I can't pass up." Another beat of silence, and then my father laughed. It wasn't a joyful sound, but harsh and dismissive. "This is absurd. You're throwing away a real career for some internet fantasy." "It's not a fantasy," I insisted, pulling up the acquisition letter on my phone and sliding it across the table. "This is happening, Dad. I've built something valuable, something important." He didn't even glance at the phone. "Technology," he spat the word like it tasted bad. "Do you have any idea how many technology startups fail every year? How many so-called geniuses end up back in their parents' basements when the bubble bursts?" "This isn't speculative," I tried again. "The acquisition is real. The money is real." My mother finally spoke, her voice thin with disappointment. "Amanda, darling, perhaps you're just overwhelmed with school. We all go through phases of doubt. Maybe you need a semester break, not a complete withdrawal." "This isn't burnout," I said. "This is me choosing a path that actually makes me happy." Thomas picked up my phone, glanced at the letter, and handed it back with a smirk. "If this were legitimate, you'd have had a lawyer review it. Have you done that, Amanda?" Or are you just taking some techie's word that they'll make you rich? Before I could answer, my father cut in, his voice rising. 3 generations. 3 generations of Wilsons have dedicated themselves to the law. I've pulled strings for you, made calls, ensured you had opportunities others would kill for, and you want to throw it all away for what computer games? It's not games, I protested. It's a privacy platform that protects people's personal data from exploitation. It's important work. Important. He was shouting now, his face flushed with anger. You know what's important. Tradition, family, commitment, not chasing, whatever shiny distraction catches your eye this week. I've been building this for 2 years, I said, my own voice rising to match his, while maintaining a full course load, while pretending to be the daughter you wanted, instead of being who I actually am. And who exactly are you, he demanded. Because the daughter I raised understood responsibility and respect. The daughter I raised wouldn't lie to her family while engaging in some digital side hustle. The daughter you raised has been miserable trying to live up to your impossible standards. I shot back, years of resentment finally breaking through. The daughter you raised has talents and dreams that don't fit into your narrow definition of success. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. If you're so unhappy with the opportunities you've been given, perhaps you should make your own way without our support. That's exactly what I'm doing, I said, standing to face him. I'm choosing my own path. Patrick, my mother interjected, always the peacemaker. Let's all calm down and discuss this rationally. But my father was beyond reason. No, Barbara, if she wants to throw away everything we've given her, she can do it somewhere else. He pointed toward the front door. Get out and stay out. I stood frozen, unable to believe what I was hearing. Dad, I whispered, you're not serious. I'm deadly serious, he said, his voice ice cold now. If you're not a law student, you're not my daughter. It's that simple. Patrick, please, my mother said weakly, but she made no move to contradict him. Thomas just watched with an expression somewhere between shock and satisfaction. Get your coat, my father ordered, and don't come back until you've come to your senses. In a daze, I walked to the foyer and took my coat from the closet. My mother followed, wringing her hands. Hell, calm down, she whispered. Just give him time. Will he? I asked. Or will he only accept me if I give up everything that matters to me? She had no answer. My father appeared in the hallway. Your keys, he said, holding out his hand. What? The car is in my name. The insurance is in my name. If you're so independent, you won't need it. I stared at him in disbelief. You're taking my car. How am I supposed to get home? That's not my problem anymore. His hand remained extended. With trembling fingers, I removed the car key from my keyring and placed it in his palm. Then I opened the front door to find it had started raining, a cold February downpour that matched my mood perfectly. Amanda, wait. My mother called, but my father blocked her path. Let her go, Barbara. She needs to learn actions, have consequences. The last thing I saw before the door closed was my brother's smug face peering from the dining room and my mother's tears as she turned away. I stood on the porch for a full minute, rain soaking through my coat, unable to process what had just happened. Then, clutching my laptop bag to my chest, I began walking toward the bus stop half a mile away, each step taking me further from the family that had just disowned me, but closer to the future I actually wanted. The last bus had already gone. I stood at the empty stop, rain plastering my hair to my face, and laughed at the absurdity of my situation. Here I was, technically a millionaire, standing soaking wet at a suburban bus stop with nowhere to go. I called an Uber, but the app showed a 20-minute wait time. I considered calling Jacob, but pride stopped me. I didn't want anyone to see me like this, broken and humiliated. Instead, I walked to the 24-hour grocery store a few blocks away to wait under their covered entrance. As I stood there shivering, I checked my bank accounts on my phone. The acquisition wasn't finalized yet, so while I was wealthy on paper, my actual accessible funds were limited to my personal savings, about $8,000. Enough to live on for a few months, but not enough to immediately secure an apartment in Boston's expensive rental market, especially without proof of income or a cosigner. When the Uber finally arrived, I had nowhere to direct the driver. "Where to?" he asked, cheerfully oblivious to my distress. "Just drive around for a bit, while I figure it out," I said, climbing into the back seat. He gave me a concerned look in the rearview mirror, but pulled away from the curb without comment. After 15 minutes of aimless driving, I asked him to take me to a shopping center with a large parking lot where I could safely spend the night in my car. Then I remembered I no longer had a car. "Actually, is there an affordable hotel nearby?" I asked. He recommended a budget chain hotel near the highway, and I directed him there. The place was clean but depressing, with harsh fluorescent lighting and the faint smell of bleach. I paid for 3 nights with my credit card and dragged myself to a room with industrial carpet and mass-produced artwork bolted to the walls. Only when the door closed behind me did I finally let myself cry. I sat on the edge of the bed in my wet clothes and sobbed until my chest ached and my eyes burned. All the pressure, the pretending, the final confrontation, it all came pouring out in a flood of grief and relief so intertwined, I couldn't separate them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jacob. "How did it go?" I couldn't bring myself to respond. Instead, I peeled off my wet clothes, took a scalding hot shower, and crawled between the rough hotel sheets, wearing the complimentary bathrobe. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by replays of my father's face as he ordered me out of his life. Morning brought no clarity, just a headache and swollen eyes. I ordered room service coffee and sat cross-legged on the bed, trying to formulate a plan. The first order of business was finding a place to live. I opened my laptop and began searching for short-term rentals, but everything seemed either sketchy or outrageously expensive. My phone rang. It was Jacob. "Amanda, what's going on? You never responded last night. Did you tell your family?" The concern in his voice broke something in me, and I found myself telling him everything between sobs. The confrontation, my father's reaction, being thrown out, losing my car, sitting in a sad hotel room with nothing but a laptop and the clothes I was wearing. "Jesus, Amanda," he said when I finished. "Why didn't you call me? Coming to get you right now. Where's this hotel?" An hour later, Jacob arrived with a duffel bag of his sister's clothes that might fit me and a takeout bag of breakfast sandwiches. We sat on the hotel bed eating in silence until he finally spoke. "So you're homeless and a multimillionaire simultaneously. That's a unique situation." Despite everything, I laughed. "Pretty much." "Look," he said, "my apartment is tiny, but the couch is yours for as long as you need it. At least until we figure out next steps." I accepted his offer, packed my few belongings, and checked out of the hotel. Jacob's apartment was indeed tiny, a studio in a converted factory building in Somerville. The couch was more futon than proper sofa, but it was clean and comfortable enough. More importantly, it was offered with genuine friendship. That night, after Jacob had gone to sleep behind a Japanese room divider that separated his bed from the main living area, I sat at his desk with my laptop taking stock of my situation. I was 26 years old, effectively disowned, with no permanent address and no clear path forward. The acquisition was still in process with papers to sign and details to finalize. My law school withdrawal was complete, but I had student loans to consider. My entire life felt like it was in free fall. I created a spreadsheet because that's what I do when I need control. Assets, liabilities, immediate needs, long-term goals. I calculated how long my savings would last if I found a modest apartment. I researched the cost of replacing basic necessities from underwear to cookware. I looked into what documentation I would need for the acquisition, without my parents' cooperation. By morning, I had a plan. Not just for survival, but for building something new. Over the next week, I established a new bank account without my father's name attached. I met with the Artemis legal team to review the acquisition paperwork, bringing along an attorney Jacob recommended. I bought a used car, nothing fancy, just reliable transportation. I replaced my essential belongings, keeping purchases minimal and practical. What I didn't do was call my family. My phone showed missed calls from my mother, but no voicemails. Nothing from my father or brother. Their silence confirmed what I already knew: the conditional nature of their love. 10 days after the confrontation, the acquisition papers were signed. Within 24 hours, $15 million was transferred into my new business account. I sat on Jacob's futon, staring at the balance on my laptop screen, feeling oddly detached from the number. "So," Jacob said, popping a bottle of champagne he'd been saving, "what's next for Amanda Wilson, tech entrepreneur and newly minted millionaire?" I took a sip of champagne from a coffee mug. Jacob didn't own proper glasses and considered the question. "I need a place of my own," I said. "Somewhere completely different. Somewhere I can start fresh." "Like where? New York, San Francisco?" I shook my head. I was thinking more dramatic. West Coast, sunshine, ocean. "Los Angeles," he suggested. Maybe, I said, opening a new browser tab. "Or Malibu." Jacob laughed. "Malibu. That's a bit excessive, isn't it?" But I was already scrolling through luxury real estate listings, a plan forming in my mind. If I was going to build a new life, why not make it exactly what I wanted? After years of compromising my dreams to please others, I was ready to please myself. I found a listing that made my heart race. A modern glass and steel structure perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, an infinity pool, a home office with panoramic ocean views. The asking price, $14.8 million. "That's insane," Jacob said, looking over my shoulder. "You can't possibly be serious." "Why not?" I asked. "I can afford it. I want it. For once in my life, I'm going to choose what makes me happy, without worrying about anyone else's approval." The next morning, I called the listing agent and arranged to fly to Los Angeles that same day. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is the most dramatic, the most decisive. Sometimes you need to leap before you have time to talk yourself out of it. As my plane took off from Logan Airport, I watched Boston disappear beneath the clouds. The city that had always been my home, filled with memories and expectations, grew smaller and smaller until it vanished completely. Ahead lay California sunshine and a future entirely of my own making. The real estate agent Sophia Martinez met me at Los Angeles International Airport, driving a sleek black Tesla. She was everything I imagined. A high-end Malibu realtor would be stylish and polished, with an easy confidence that put me at ease despite my nervousness about making such a monumental purchase. "I have to admit," she said as we merged onto the Pacific Coast Highway, "when you called, saying you wanted to view a $15 million property same day, I was skeptical. We get a lot of dreamers and time wasters. But your financials checked out impressively. If you don't mind my asking, what business are you in?" "Technology," I said simply. "Data privacy." She nodded approvingly. Smart field these days. Everyone needs protection. As we drove along the coast, I rolled down my window to breathe in the salt air. The February sunshine was a stark contrast to the Boston winter it left behind. Palm trees swayed in the gentle breeze, and the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly to my right, a brilliant blue that seemed to promise possibility. For the first time since the confrontation with my family, I felt something like hope. "Here we are," Sophia announced, turning onto a private drive that wound up a cliffside. 27 Ocean View Terrace. The house was even more spectacular in person than in the photos. A masterpiece of glass, steel, and warm wood, it seemed to grow organically from the cliff face, multiple levels cascading down toward the ocean. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured sweeping views of the coastline, and the late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light. "The property sits on 2 acres, Sophia explained as she unlocked the massive front door. "Complete privacy. The nearest neighbor is a quarter-mile in either direction." I stepped into the foyer and felt my breath catch. The entryway opened into a great room with 30-foot ceilings and a wall of glass that framed the ocean like a living painting. Brazilian hardwood floors gleamed underfoot, and a floating staircase led to an open second level. The previous owner was a film director, Sophia, continued leading me through the space. He designed the house to maximize natural light for his personal photography collection. There are 5 bedrooms, 6.5 bathrooms, a home theater, wine cellar, infinity pool, and a separate guest house that could easily function as a home office or studio. I followed her from room to room in a daze, trying to imagine myself living in such grandeur. The kitchen was a chef's dream with double everything: ovens, dishwashers, refrigerators. The primary bedroom suite took up the entire top floor, with a private balcony and a bathroom larger than my first apartment. One bedroom had been converted into a massive closet with built-in storage that could hold 10 times the wardrobe I currently owned. But it was the office that sold me. Located on the lowest level, it featured 3 walls of glass that made you feel like you were suspended above the ocean. The desk was built into the room, a massive slab of live-edge walnut facing the horizon. I could imagine myself working there, building new projects, watching dolphins play in the distance. "What do you think?" Sophia asked, as we stood on the main deck watching the sun begin its descent toward the water. "It's perfect," I said simply. "I should mention there's another interested buyer," she said. "A celebrity who viewed it last week. If you're serious, I wouldn't wait." Normally, I would have recognized this as a standard sales tactic and taken time to consider such a major decision. But something in me had shifted. After years of hesitation and compromise, I was ready for bold action. "I'm serious," I said. "I'll pay the asking price, all cash, if we can close quickly." Sophia's eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. "How quickly were you thinking?" "As soon as legally possible. I'd like to move in this week." She pulled out her phone. "Let me call my office. With an all-cash offer at asking price, we might be able to arrange something extraordinary." 48 hours later, I sat in a lawyer's office in downtown Los Angeles, signing a mountain of paperwork. The seller, eager to complete the sale before leaving for a film project in New Zealand, had agreed to an expedited closing. By that afternoon, I had the keys to my new home and a significantly lighter bank account. I spent the first night in the empty house, with nothing but an air mattress, my laptop, and a bottle of champagne Sophia had given me as a housewarming gift. I dragged the mattress into the great room and lay there watching stars appear over the ocean, feeling both incredibly powerful and terrifyingly alone. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I hired a concierge service to help furnish the essential rooms, giving them a budget and basic guidelines, but otherwise leaving the details to their expertise. I contacted utility companies, set up internet service, arranged for security system installation. I bought a new car, a white Range Rover that seemed appropriate for my new environment. A week after closing, the house was beginning to feel like a home, at least in the spaces I used most frequently. The kitchen had the basics. The primary bedroom had a proper bed and linens, and the office was fully equipped with everything I needed to work. The rest remained mostly empty, vast spaces waiting for purpose. I established a routine, quickly rising with the sun for coffee on the deck, working through the morning in my glass-walled office, taking afternoon breaks to walk on the private beach below the property. I spoke with Jacob daily, updating him on the acquisition integration and planning for our next venture. I hired a local chef to deliver prepared meals 3 times a week, a housekeeper to come twice weekly, and a property manager to handle maintenance. From the outside, my life looked perfect. I had wealth, freedom, and a home magazine worthy enough to make anyone envious. But inside, I struggled with the emptiness of my achievement. I'd proven my worth financially, but the people I most wanted to impress would never know, or worse, wouldn't care. My neighbors on either side introduced themselves within the first 2 weeks. To the north was a retired software executive and his wife, who brought over homemade kombucha and information about the community association. To the south was a music producer who mostly lived in New York but used the Malibu house as a winter retreat. Both were politely curious about the young woman who had purchased such an expensive property, but neither pried beyond basic pleasantries. 3 weeks after moving in, I hosted my first business meeting in the house. Artemis had connected me with potential investors for a new project, and Jacob flew out to join me for the presentation. Seeing the house through his eyes made me realize how far it'd come in such a short time. "This is absolutely insane," he said, wandering from room to room. "It's like something from a movie." "Too much?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. He shook his head. "Not too much. Just different." The Amanda I knew in Boston lived on ramen and coded in 24-hour coffee shops. This Amanda has infinity pools and private beaches. "I'm still the same person," I insisted. "Are you?" he asked, not unkindly. Because the Amanda I knew was desperate for her family's approval. This place feels like a pretty dramatic statement in the opposite direction. His observations stung because it contained truth. The mansion wasn't just a home. It was a monument to my rejection of my family's values and their rejection of me. Every extravagant feature was a silent rebellion against my father's practicality, my mother's restraint, my brother's conformity. The business meeting went well, with the investors impressed by both our technical expertise and the impressive setting. As they left, one of them shook my hand and said, "You've certainly made it, Miss Wilson. Your family must be very proud." I smiled tightly and thanked him, but his words echoed long after he'd gone. The truth was, my family had no idea what it achieved. They didn't know about the mansion, the acquisition, any of it. As far as they knew, I was still a law school dropout making a foolish mistake. That night, after Jacob had gone to bed in one of the many guest rooms, I sat on the edge of the infinity pool with my feet in the water, looking out at the moonlight, reflecting on the ocean. The house was everything I'd wanted, a perfect physical manifestation of success. But success felt hollow without anyone to share it with. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if I'd made a mistake. Not in leaving law school or pursuing technology, but in cutting off my family so completely. Perhaps there was middle ground I hadn't explored, compromise I hadn't attempted. Then I remembered my father's face as he ordered me out of his house, the finality in his voice when he said, "Get out and stay out." I remembered my mother's silent complicity, my brother's smug satisfaction. They had made their choice, and I had made mine. As I watched the waves crash against the shore below, I realized that true independence meant accepting both the freedom and the loneliness that came with it. This house, this life, was mine alone, for better or worse. I had built it without them, and I would have to find a way to make it feel like home, even if that meant redefining what home meant to me. 3 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, home improvements, and long solitary walks on the beach. I established a rhythm to my days that kept me busy enough to avoid dwelling on my family situation. I hired an interior designer to finish furnishing the house, focusing on creating spaces that reflected my personality rather than impressing hypothetical visitors. I joined a local tech entrepreneurs group and started making professional connections in the Los Angeles area. On the surface, I was adapting well to my new life. Underneath, I was still processing the abrupt severance from my family. I checked my phone reflexively each evening, half expecting to see my mother's name appear with a reconciliatory message. But after those initial missed calls in the first few days, there had been nothing but silence. I hadn't exactly been forthcoming either. Pride prevented me from reaching out, from being the one to extend an olive branch. After all, I wasn't the one who had thrown someone out of their home. I wasn't the one who had made love conditional on career choices. Then everything changed with one article. Tech Insider, a respected industry publication, ran a feature on the Artemis acquisition of Cypher. The piece included interviews with me and Jacob, details of the technology we'd developed, and speculation about our next ventures. It was a flattering profile that positioned us as rising stars in the privacy technology sector. And it mentioned, almost as an aside, that it recently relocated to a Malibu estate to establish a West Coast innovation hub. I thought nothing of the article when it was published. It was good publicity for our work and might lead to interesting opportunities. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly it would find its way to Boston. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office reviewing design specifications when my phone lit up with a number I immediately recognized: my brother's law firm. For several rings, I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Curiosity won. Hello, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Amanda Thomas sounded different than I remembered, less smug and more uncertain. I just read about you in Tech Insider. Did you? I kept my voice level, giving nothing away. $15 million, a Malibu estate. Is that true? Every word I said. Why are you calling Thomas? He cleared his throat. Mom and Dad saw the article too. Dad's been difficult since you left. Since I left, I repeated incredulously. You mean since he threw me out and took my car, leaving me stranded in the rain? That's not exactly how he tells it, Thomas said. Look, that's not why I'm calling. Mom wants to visit you. All of us do, actually. To see if we can sort this out. I nearly dropped the phone. You want to visit now that you know. I'm rich and successful. How convenient. It's not like that he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Family is family. We should try to work through this. Funny how that wasn't the sentiment when Dad was screaming at me to get out and stay out, I said. Tell me something, Thomas. If that article had described me living in a studio apartment struggling to make rent, would you still be calling? His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said. If you want to visit, fine. But I'm not paying for your flights, and I'm not pretending the last month never happened. Text me when you've made arrangements. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline and anger. The audacity was breathtaking. After disowning me completely, they wanted to reconcile now that I was financially successful. The conditional love couldn't be more transparent. Thomas texted later that evening, flights booked for this weekend. Arriving Saturday morning, 3 of us. Send address. I replied with the property details, then spent the next 2 days alternating between cleaning an already immaculate house and rehearsing what I would say when they arrived. Should I be coldly civil, openly hostile, cautiously welcoming? No approach felt right. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect California day that still felt miraculous after years of Boston winters. I dressed carefully in white linen pants and a simple blue blouse, casual but put together. I asked my regular chef to prepare a light lunch that could be served on the deck. I opened wine to breathe arranged flowers in the entryway and tried to calm my racing heart. At precisely 11:30, a rental car pulled into my driveway. I watched from the great room windows as my father emerged from the driver's seat, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. My mother exited the passenger side, smoothing her skirt nervously. Thomas unfolded himself from the back, glancing up at the house with poorly concealed awe. I met them at the door before they could ring the bell. Welcome to Malibu, I said, stepping aside to let them enter. They filed past me in silence, taking in the soaring ceilings, the panoramic views, the obvious luxury of the space. My mother was the first to speak. Amanda, she said, moving as if to hug me, then stopping when she saw my rigid posture. The house is beautiful. Thank you, I said. Would you like a tour before lunch? I led them through the house with the detached professionalism of a real estate agent, pointing out features and amenities without personal commentary. My father remained silent, his expression unreadable. Thomas asked practical questions about square footage and property taxes. My mother made appropriate sounds of appreciation at each new revelation of wealth. The tour ended on the main deck, where lunch had been arranged on a table overlooking the ocean. We sat in uncomfortable silence, as the personal chef I had hired served the first course, a chilled soup that my mother complimented reflexively. After the chef retreated to the kitchen, my father finally spoke. So, he said, studying me across the table, this is where $15 million gets you. 14.8 for the house, I corrected. The rest went to taxes, furnishings, and investments. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Impressive. I didn't think technology could be so lucrative. Data privacy is an essential service in today's world, I said. People value their personal information even if they don't always act like it. Another uncomfortable silence descended, broken only by the sound of waves crashing below. Amanda, my mother, finally said, setting down her spoon. We wanted to come because, well, we miss you. The way things ended wasn't right. I took a sip of water, considering my response. Which part wasn't right? The part where Dad disowned me, or the part where none of you contacted me until you found out I was wealthy? That's not fair, my brother interjected. Mom called you several times. Without leaving messages, I pointed out. And Dad. Not a word until he saw my name in a magazine. My father shifted in his seat. I was angry, he said, as if that explained everything. You threw away an opportunity many would kill for. For an opportunity many would kill for, I countered. The difference is, it was an opportunity I actually wanted. We can see that now, my mother said, gesturing to encompass the house and view. Clearly you made the right choice for yourself. Her words sparked something in me, a realization that cut through my defensive anger. That's the problem, I said quietly. You can see it now because there's material evidence of success. But you couldn't support me when all I had was passion and potential. Your love was conditional on me following your approved path, and when I chose differently, you cut me off completely. That isn't true, my mother protested weakly. Isn't it? I looked directly at my father. You told me if I wasn't a law student, I wasn't your daughter. Those were your exact words. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was upset. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. And yet you made no attempt to take them back, I said. For 3 weeks I could have been homeless or desperate for all you knew. You didn't check. You didn't care. Not until you saw proof that I'd succeeded without you. The chef appeared with the main course, interrupting the tense exchange. We ate in strained silence, the exquisite food going largely unappreciated amid the emotional standoff. As the meal concluded, my father attempted a different approach. Your mother's right, Amanda. We miss you. Whatever happened, we're still family. Perhaps we could start fresh now that we're all calmer. I set down my napkin and looked at each of them in turn. My father proud and stubborn, but clearly unsettled by the wealth I had acquired without his help. My mother conflict-averse and eager for harmony at any cost. My brother reassessing me with new respect, born entirely of financial success. I would like to have a relationship with you, I said carefully, but not one based on the same dynamics as before. I won't be diminished or controlled. I won't pretend my choices are less valuable than the ones you would have made for me. And I won't accept conditional love, based on external markers of success. No one is trying to control you, my father said, gesturing around. Obviously you're doing fine on your own. I'm not talking about now, I clarified. I'm talking about moving forward. If we're going to rebuild any kind of relationship, it has to be on equal footing with mutual respect. My mother reached across the table for my hand. Of course we respect you, darling. We're so proud of what you've accomplished. I gently withdrew my hand. But that's just it. You're proud now because I'm rich. Would you be proud if I were doing work I loved, but living in a small apartment? Would you be proud if I had followed my passion but hadn't struck gold? None of them answered, their silence confirming what I already knew. I think you should go, I said, standing up. I'm not saying the door is closed forever, but I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine just because you're impressed with my house. Amanda, please. My mother began, but my father cut her off. She's right, Barbara, he said, surprising all of us. We came here expecting. I don't know what we expected, but Amanda deserves time. He stood and extended his hand formally, as if concluding a business meeting. Your mother will send contact information for when you're ready. The ball is in your court. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, as I walked them to the door. My mother hugged me quickly before I could object, whispering I'm sorry in my ear. Thomas gave an awkward wave. And then they were gone, driving down my winding driveway toward the Pacific Coast Highway, leaving me alone once again in my beautiful empty mansion. I stood in the doorway until their car disappeared from view, feeling strangely hollow. The confrontation I had rehearsed so carefully had come and gone, and while I had maintained my dignity and expressed my truth, There was no satisfaction in it, no closure, no vindication, just the complicated reality that families can't be neatly categorized as villains or heroes. They were flawed people who had hurt me deeply, and I was a flawed person still learning to stand firmly in my own power. Closing the door, I walked back to the deck and sat watching the ocean, letting the rhythm of the waves calm my tumultuous emotions. The house felt different somehow, as if my family's brief presence had changed its energy. For the first time since moving in, it felt truly mine, consecrated by the difficult truth-telling that had occurred within its walls. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We love you, Amanda. When you're ready, we will be here." I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Instead, I saved it as a reminder that healing would come in its own time, on my own terms, in this space I had created for myself. The days following my family's visit were surprisingly peaceful. It expected emotional turmoil, second-guessing, maybe even regret for sending them away. Instead, I felt a clarity I'd been missing since the night my father first threw me out. By standing my ground, by refusing to pretend their conditional acceptance was enough, I'd honored the person I'd fought so hard to become. That doesn't mean it was easy. There were still nights I woke up at 3 in the morning replaying conversations in my head, thinking of more eloquent responses I could have given. There were still moments when a beautiful sunset over the Pacific made me wish I had someone to share it with, someone who had known me before I became successful. But for the first time in my life, I was fully present in my own story, not performing for an audience of critical family members. I threw myself into work finalizing the integration of Cipher's technology into the Artemis platform. Jacob divided his time between Boston and Malibu, staying in my guest house for a week each month as we planned our next venture. We were developing a tool that would help people track and control how their personal data was being used across platforms, something that combined my technical skills with my growing interest in digital rights. As spring turned to summer, I began to build a life that was truly mine. I joined a local women's entrepreneurship group where I met Sarah, a biotech founder who became my first real friend in California. I took up paddleboarding, spending early mornings on the water before the beaches got crowded. I hired a personal chef to teach me to cook instead of just delivering meals, discovering a previously unknown passion for creating with my hands after spending so many hours in the abstract world of code. But the most important relationship I built was with Eliza Chen, a 50-year-old tech pioneer who had founded one of the first successful women-led software companies in the 90s. We met at an industry conference where I was speaking about privacy innovations, and she approached me afterward with insightful questions and a lunch invitation. Over sushi at a quiet restaurant away from the conference center, she told me her own story of family rejection when she dropped out of medical school to pursue computer science. "My parents didn't speak to me for 2 years, she said, matter-of-factly. Now they brag about me to everyone they meet. But I never forget those 2 years of silence." Something in her straightforward acknowledgement of the pain without bitterness, but without minimizing it, either resonated deeply with me. By the end of lunch, I'd shared my own story, including details I'd kept from even close friends, like Jacob. "You need a mentor," she declared as we waited for the check. "Someone who's been where you are. And I need a protege who isn't just another Stanford clone. What do you say?" That lunch marked the beginning of the most significant professional relationship of my career. Eliza became the guide I'd never had, offering advice on everything from technical challenges to boardroom politics to finding balance between ambition and well-being. She didn't try to replace my mother or fix my relationship with my family. Instead, she showed me what adult mentorship could look like when separated from the complicated dynamics of blood relationships. "The tech world is full of young geniuses who burn out by 30, she told me during one of our regular beach walks. "I want you to build something that lasts both in your work and your life." With Eliza's encouragement, I established the Wilson Technology Scholarship for women pursuing unconventional paths in computer science. The first year, we funded 5 students who had demonstrated exceptional promise but faced significant obstacles, financial or otherwise. I thought of it as creating the support system I wished it had, turning my painful experience into opportunity for others. By the fall, my house no longer felt empty. It hosted dinner parties for my growing circle of friends, weekend retreats for women in tech, and strategy sessions for our new venture. The spaces that had once echoed with my solitary footsteps now held laughter, debate, and collaboration. Id turned the largest guest bedroom into a library filled with books on technology, philosophy, psychology, and art subjects that expanded my thinking beyond the narrow focus of my upbringing. As for my family, the situation remained complicated but evolving. My mother called once a month, careful conversations that stayed on safe topics, her garden community events, neutral childhood memories. She never pressured me to visit Boston or mention my father directly, but sometimes she would say, "He asks about you, a tentative bridge. Neither of us was ready to cross." Thomas surprised me by sending a genuine email apologizing for his role in the family dynamic, acknowledging that Head often enjoyed his favored status at my expense. "I never considered how different our experiences were in the same household," he wrote. "I'm trying to be more aware of my assumptions and privileges. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start." My father remained the most distant, communicating only through my mother. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but as months passed, I found the sharp pain of his rejection dulling into something more manageable, a scar, rather than an open wound. With distance and therapy, I began to understand that my father's rigidity came from his own fears and limitations. His identity was so completely bound up in his profession that he couldn't imagine fulfillment outside that narrow definition of success. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it helped me see him as a flawed human rather than a villain in my story. One year after moving into the Malibu house, I hosted a small gathering to mark both the anniversary and the launch of our new data rights platform. Jacob was there with his new girlfriend. Sarah brought her wife Eliza, flew in from Seattle, and a handful of other close friends filled the deck with conversation and laughter as the sun set over the Pacific. As I looked around at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who valued me for exactly who I was, rather than who they wanted me to be, I felt a sense of peace I'd been chasing my whole life. This was what belonging felt like. This was what unconditional support felt like. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, and I was alone again, I walked down to the water's edge. The night was clear stars, reflecting on the gentle waves, a perfect California evening. I thought about the frightened, angry young woman who had stood in the rain outside her parents' house just 1 year earlier, uncertain of her future, but determined to live authentically. I wished I could tell that version of myself that the path ahead, while difficult, would lead to a life richer and more fulfilling than she could imagine. That the rejection that felt like the end of everything would actually be the beginning of something better. That sometimes being pushed out is exactly the push you need to soar. The healing wasn't complete, and maybe it never would be entirely. Family wounds leave deep marks. But I had built a life that honored my talents and values. I had created success on my own terms. I had learned that conditional love isn't really love at all, and that sometimes the family you choose is more nurturing than the family you're born into. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to my parents' approval, my bank account, or even my professional achievements. My worth was inherent, unchangeable, mine to recognize regardless of external validation. As I walked back up to the house, my house, I felt gratitude wash over me. Not just for the material comfort it represented, but for the journey that had brought me here. The rejection that had seemed so devastating had actually been liberation in disguise, forcing me to build a life aligned with my true self rather than someone else's expectations. That night before going to bed, I finally replied to my mother's last text message, the one I'd saved all these months. "I love you too. I'm not ready for a visit yet, but maybe we could talk on the phone sometime next week." It was a small step, an open door, rather than complete reconciliation. But it was authentic, a reflection of where I truly was in my healing journey, rather than where anyone else thought I should be. And that I realized as I drifted off to sleep in my beautiful home overlooking the Pacific was the greatest freedom of all, the freedom to heal and grow at my own pace, on my own terms, in my own time. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between following your passion and meeting family expectations? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more authentic journeys of finding your own path. Remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most beautiful destinations. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to live your own truth, whatever that may be.